Singapore Airlines flies one of the most advanced aircraft in the world, a jet built to hold up to 350 people with just 161 seats on board. 19 hours to New York, carrying a little over a third of what that airplane is capable of carrying. And the explanation the industry has been repeating for 20 years is this one. Ultra-long haul demands an empty airplane. Passengers are weight. Weight is fuel. Fuel is range. Except Qatar Airways disagrees. Starting in December 2026, Qatar will connect Doha to Auckland with a Boeing 777-300ER carrying 354 seats, 312 of them in economy, 10 across, twice the people, a comparable distance, and an older airplane. Somebody in this story is about to get hurt. Start with the math Singapore Airlines did, because it's real and it's brutal. Every liter of jet fuel weighs nearly 0.8 of a kilogram. Filling the tanks makes the airplane heavier. A heavier airplane generates more drag, which burns more fuel. So you load more fuel, which makes it heavier still. Engineers call this the fuel weight penalty. Past a certain point, the extra liter in the tank doesn't buy you an extra liter of range. It buys you a fraction, and that fraction shrinks with every liter you add. Singapore learned this the expensive way. In 2004, it opened Singapore to Newark with a 4-engine Airbus A340-500 configured with 100 seats, business class only. The longest route commercial aviation had ever seen. And the airplane needed so much kerosene to cross the Pacific that the fuel weighed more than everything else on board combined. It worked for 9 years. Then, in November 2008, crude passed $100 a barrel. 4 engines burning fuel for 18 hours against oil that wouldn't stop climbing. The math stopped working. In November 2013, Singapore handed the aircraft back to Airbus and canceled the route. The market was never the problem. 2 of the largest financial centers on the planet joined by a single direct line, filled with corporate travelers who buy a ticket by the clock, not by the price. The problem was the airplane. In 2015, Airbus came back with the A350-900ULR, 2 engines instead of 4, a composite fuselage, and fuel capacity expanded from 141,000 to 165,000 liters without changing the external shape of the aircraft, a design that burns roughly 25% less fuel than the A340-500. Singapore ordered 7. And it made the same call it made in 2004, only with more conviction. No economy, no first class, 161 people. In October 2018, the flight came back, and the thesis came back with it. To fly 19 hours, you empty the airplane. Qantas arrived at the same conclusion down a different road. Project Sunrise, Sydney to London and New York nonstop, will use an A350-1000 ULR with an additional fuel tank and 238 passengers on board, roughly half of what that same model carries in a high-density layout. 6 first-class suites, 52 business, 40 premium economy, and a well-being zone taking up floor space that could have held another dozen seats. 2 airlines, 2 continents, 2 generations of aircraft. Same answer. Take the seats out. And this is exactly where Qatar breaks from everyone else. Qatar Airways is not a newcomer to this fight. In December 2017, the airline launched Doha to Auckland nonstop, 14,500 kilometers, around 16 hours eastbound, more than 17 coming back. At that moment, it was the longest commercial flight in the world. And look at what it did with that record. It didn't take economy out. When the route returned in 2023, the A350-1000 assigned to it carried 327 people, 46 in business and 281 in economy, twice what Singapore carries on the competing route. Now it's pushing further in the opposite direction. From December 9, 2026, the daily Auckland service becomes Doha-Melbourne-Auckland, replacing the routing that stops in Adelaide today. And the airplane isn't an A350-1000, it's the 777-300ER, 354 seats, economy in a 3-4-3 layout, 10 people per row. And here's the detail. This is a relatively old airplane, It burns more fuel than an A350-1000. So how is Qatar going to make money on this flight? The answer is calculation, with a dose of circumstance. The replacement for the 777-300ER is the 777X, and the 777X has been delayed for years, with entry into service pushed to 2027. Qatar is one of the airlines holding firm orders for it. Until it arrives, the airplane Qatar has is the airplane Qatar will use, and the 777-300ER happens to be the most reliable and most fully depreciated widebody in its fleet. It's already paid for, the crews are already trained, the spares are already on the shelf. An out-of-production airplane with the investment already written off is the cheapest thing you can put on a long-haul route. Singapore buys a brand new generation aircraft to carry 161 people. Qatar takes an aircraft that's out of production and packs 354 into it. The answer isn't in the airplane, it's in the map. Singapore needs that A350 to fly 19 hours straight because there's nothing useful between Singapore and New York. Every hour of that flight is pure weight, and the only way to pay for it is to charge a lot of money to very few people. Qatar doesn't have that problem. Between Doha and Auckland, there's Australia, so it breaks the trip apart. Doha to Melbourne, Melbourne to Auckland. Neither leg forces the aircraft to operate at the edge of its tanks, and neither leg requires a special airplane. The 777-300ER handles both comfortably, with a full cabin, no extra tank, no exotic configuration, nothing that has to be ordered to spec. Except the stop isn't a penalty, it's revenue. Qatar holds fifth FIMAN rights on the Melbourne-Auckland leg. That means it can sell tickets to people who only want to cross the Tasman Sea, competing head-on with Qantas, Air New Zealand, and Jetstar on one of the busiest international corridors in the Southern Hemisphere. The airplane that would have sat on the ramp in Melbourne waiting for the overnight back to Doha now runs a round trip to Auckland and sells those seats too. And there's a third layer. The departure out of Doha is at 1:50 in the morning, time to catch the wave of flights arriving from Europe overnight. The passenger who lands from London or Frankfurt boards for Melbourne shortly after. What Qatar is selling isn't the non-stop, it's the connection that works. And this is where the seat count stops being a cabin detail and becomes the whole argument. A 16-hour flight carries an enormous fixed cost: fuel, crew, fees, maintenance, and that cost doesn't change much whether the airplane holds 160 people or 350. What changes is how many heads you divide the bill by. Singapore divides it among a few and charges each of them a fortune. Qatar divides it among many and charges what the market will pay. Two ways of reaching the same place, and the second one tolerates far more swing in demand because it doesn't depend on the executive in Manhattan continuing to buy business class. So there are two readings of the same problem, and both of them make money. Singapore sells time. Its ticket is expensive because it removes the stop, and the passenger buying that ticket measures the cost of the flight in working hours lost. 161 people paying a lot. Qatar sells network reach. Its ticket is cheaper, its airplane is older, its economy cabin is full, and it covers more destinations, more often, moving far more people per departure. 354 people paying whatever they'll pay. Each one has an obvious weak spot. Singapore is exposed the day corporate travel budgets tighten. With no economy cabin, there's no fallback for filling the airplane. Qatar is exposed the day passengers stop accepting a stopover and a 10 across seat in order to save money. And physics doesn't settle this fight. Physics only tells you what's possible, not what's profitable. Qatar's 777-300ER is out of production. Singapore's A350ULR required a dedicated order of 7 aircraft to serve a single route. One of these two models is going to look obvious 10 years from now, and nobody in the industry agrees today on which one. But look at what happened while everyone argued about which airplane can fly the farthest. The airline that once held the longest flight in the world stopped defending it and chose to carry twice as many people.